Okay, hello and welcome everybody. So we're going to get started. Thanks to everyone who joined. We've got a great lineup today. I've got a set of what I'd call very esteemed guests who are all experts in their own firms and are all part of some of the very big industry initiatives that we're going to talk about today. We have a great span across the industry of buy side, we've got sell side depositories, and we've got both pre and post trade vendors, as well, of course, us here at Fix. Some housekeeping quickly. So you're all going to be on mute. If you want to ask a question, Amy, I believe they just press the button with a little raised hand. You can submit questions or you submit via the Q&A. Any questions that come in, we're obviously going to try and answer if they don't break the flow. If they do, we'll put them to the end of the session and we will get to those questions at the end. Running order of the session, it's going to be a very quick market landscape overview. Then we're going to get into the impact of some of these market initiatives. We'll then shift into the opportunities that can be materialized off the back of that. Then we're going to do a little bit of a looking ahead. So some very quick introductions, and now everyone else can turn their cameras on so you can see all the other amazing speakers. Pa did it a little bit early, but we'll let Pa off. So my name is Lawrence Jones. I am the Regional Director for the Americas for the FIX trading community, and I also co-chair the Global Post-Trade Working Group. Pa, we'll go to you first and we'll just go along the line.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Pardeep Castles and I lead the securities and claims product lines here at Access FinTech.
And Lou?
Thank you, Lawrence. Lou Rosado from BlackRock. My focus here at BlackRock is on our investment operations strategy and our industry engagement. Also very active in working with FIX as a director on the board and also in multiple committees that help us drive the FIX standard through the industry further with our ecosystem partners. So thank you, Lawrence, for having us.
Thanks, Lou. Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Sean McEntee, I am the head of the matching and agreements business as in the ITP space of DTCC, specifically responsible for our CTM and trade suite products, and have played a significant role in the SIFMA ICI accelerated settlement working group discussions. For those that have seen me before, that's probably where you've seen me.
Excellent, thanks, Sean. And Chris?
Hey everyone, Chris Dower, Goldman Sachs. I'm the MD in charge of our client coverage group, which we work with our clients to eliminate post-trade inefficiencies and friction amongst our firms, and partner on key strategic deliverables in the operations space.
Excellent, thanks. And last but not least, Ray?
Thanks, LJ. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. I'm Ray Shivers. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Sapphire, and appreciate the opportunity to be with everybody today.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. So for the audience, just a bit of context. It's a very brief kind of market landscape. So I'm sure a lot of you that are dialed in are pretty aware there have been several ongoing industry initiatives. Some of these are new, some of these have been going on for some time, that really focus around accelerating settlement, achieving greater transparency through the life cycle of a trade, and of course byproducts of both of those would be ultimately to achieve high levels of efficiency and high levels of STP. I think if you look at the last 2 years, you've definitely seen a notable change in the landscape, and I'd say most, if not all firms, are striving to try and get a cleaner, faster and more efficient set of processes and data standards, and that's right the way through from pre-trade onboarding all the way through to what we call settlement of that, which is really an opportunity to offer further automation and optionality within the industry to follow a set of standards that have been produced in collaboration with the industry. So we'll get into it properly. I know the other speakers probably don't want to sit here and listen to me waffle on for an hour. So let's talk about the impact, about the ongoing changes that we're seeing in the industry. Obviously, a lot of the processes today, they're still unfortunately heavily manual, and I'm sure you've all got a very good take on what it means to firms like yourselves. So let's start with you, Sean. I'm not picking anyone in any particular order, but you've got a very good insight, of the life cycle of a security, for example, at DTCC. If you just want to give us your views on, the impact of a lot of the initiatives out there on the day-to-day processes as they are today.
Yeah, sure. So, separate and aside from T1, which is obviously a huge focus for us, with the pandemic and market volatility, we're already seeing, unprecedented volumes in the market and in our systems specifically. So that's really driven, over the past 3 years, just renewed focus and demand from our clients for further automation and standardization in the post-trade pre-settlement space where we live. So just to tie that in terms of scale and to tie it into the FIX community, we've grown over the last couple of years specifically our FIX community of clients that are connecting into CTM, both buy side and sell side, to nearly 500 clients at this point that are leveraging the FIX protocol for allocation, confirmation, messaging, which is great. And then when you layer in, the T1 proposal and all the work that we've done around accelerated settlement, that's just really a game changer for the industry and for our business. And we're spending an enormous amount of time on a day-to-day basis talking to our clients about what that will mean and pushing forward that message of the need for automation, the need for standards, in order to achieve those kinds of timelines.
Excellent, thanks, Sean. And how about you, Lou? Let's kind of jump to the buy side. You always know you've got a very good view. Let's hear the buy side view.
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Current state, and I'll start with the full lifecycle view, or the opportunity to talk about that today, and then how FIX plays a role in that. Really is always starting from a principled approach at BlackRock. We have a core or number one principle that the focus starts with the client. So if you look at it from a lifecycle point of view, our clients have needs. Sean kind of touched on that. The client is the center of then what we develop to create solutions, and then move the journey through the lifecycle to finality, like you started us out with. So when we start there, we start looking at the workflow from front to back, versus looking at it, like we might have done historically, or our partners in the ecosystem might have done historically, is to look at things vertically. The investment solutions that we create for our client then generate into how we manage risk, implement it, or create an investment opportunity or idea or product, then bring that out and implement it through trading, then move through the post-trade and the asset sourcing activities that live through to some point of finality. And then, continually recycle through that life cycle when we add new things or maintain those investments. Historically, though, there's a lot of disparity, and still today there's a lot of disparity or disconnection from some of those things. And we're trying to, in the current state for us, is really get them connected again. Looking at the full life cycle, bringing the pre-trade activity to then the investment idea and implementation, to then the reconciliations or the confirmations and settlement activities or clearing, to then the asset sourcing activities to better connect what we do to get that client experience higher again in terms of the opportunity to implement and advance new strategies, but not put operational risk or friction inside that puzzle through the journey of that life cycle. And it's very powerful when we get that right. And I'll close with, that's really why we're here to talk about that today as it relates to FIX, because FIX today in an open protocol always looked at the travel of information and data through a full life cycle, and can connect then the risk management or pre-trade activities to risk management to then place an order and execute a trade, to bring that back then to generate an allocation or a confirmation, to now move that through the asset sourcing activity to independently move data and bring the quality up higher through the use or the connectivity to those upfront things to service an asset, process a corporate action, that full lifecycle view in terms of all that. And that's what Fix brings to us today.
Great. I couldn't agree more, Lou. Thanks. And Chris, how about your view from the sales side, from a broker's perspective? What do you see as some of the challenges today?
Yeah, thanks, Lawrence. I think when we look at the challenges, everything boils down to data and data attributes and the ability to move one piece of information to another place in the quickest, straightest line possible. And what that requires is some upfront work to be done in the pre-trade space, some configuration, and then as we message things, those data attributes are clean and pristine, and they matriculate their way through the life cycle of a transaction. I'm growing to hate the phrase post-trade. It's just, there is a trade. There's things that happen on the trade, but it's still the trade. It's like, and the more that we can connect at the beginning, the much the easier it is to have the end users have a positive experience. My role at Goldman is for our ops end users to have a great experience. Broadly speaking, that means they shouldn't have to talk to me because there's not an outstanding confirmation, there's not an exchange break, there's not a settlement problem, there's not an asset servicing issue. And so what we're trying to do is leverage the ecosystem, and seeing one of the things that's been refreshing over the last couple of years is a move away from buy side wanting these bespoke processes. And it used to be one of those things that you see is like you set up a bespoke process between a sell side and a buy side, and then over time that eradicates it to something and it turns it to an issue. And it used to be seen as like a positive. It was an enhanced client offering, when in fact the better offering is properly connected ecosystem, mutualizing all of the challenges of the industry, looking at it holistically, being able to transfer information from one firm to another or a third party in a clear way. And so, we are seeing a change in thought. We're seeing an embracement of data and a real, ability to increase the speed and efficiency of, the lifecycle management of a transaction.
Perfect. I think we should be asking Chris to rename post-trade. I think we should poll the audience what they think we should call it, because I'm about to say, actually, to his disgust, that we actually have a post-trade vendor on here. We also have a pre-trade vendor on here. Maybe I should just call them trade vendors, because obviously we've got Par, and we've got Ray, who'll also have slightly different views here. So Par, let's start with yourself again. You guys at Access FinTech, great product. Give us a bit of context in terms of what you guys have seen, particularly from the industry, on some of the challenges.
So I think very much aligned with what's been discussed already. For us, a lot of the challenges or the opportunities, I guess, that we're seeing on the market are definitely data related. So I think that theme of disconnected data, people sharing the same information but in a different language, a different structure, is an area where we definitely see room for improvement. I think this is where Fix, having agreed best practice standards with the market, is a great step forward, but it's actually holding organizations accountable to that and recognizing that not everybody's going to fall in line with it, and how can we add a normalization layer so that we can make things feel fluent and consistent even when they are different. So for me, that's really key. And then it evolves into transparency of that data. I think historically, and for anybody on the line who hasn't met me before, my background is in middle office operations. So I did that for 10 years. And what I experienced through that is that organizations have historically had a tendency to be quite protective over their data. Like, no, I can't share this with you, or I'm a custodian, so it's not necessarily mine. So there's kind of this tendency to lean towards not being as transparent. That's definitely something that I've seen shift over the last 2 to 3 years. So I think that move towards more openly sharing data, recognizing that that's not necessarily in and of itself a differentiator, but it makes things better for the whole market, is definitely key. And then actually using that data properly. We can bring it all into one place and say, here's a ton of data. We're processing over 35 million transactions through our infrastructure every single day at the moment. But if I handed it over to you, you'd be like, where do I start with this? So it's not just having it all in one place, but it's having it clean, usable, so that organizations can actually get insight from it. And that's one of the next steps that I see as to what's to come, what's actually driving inefficiency, what's driving non-STP, where can we actually find the areas that we need to focus on and improve to have us land T1 successfully and become increasingly efficient across the street. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
No, great. And you made a very good point about the standards as well. Obviously, at Fix, we can create standards until the sun doesn't shine. But if people don't adhere to them, if people don't follow them, obviously, it's hard for us to police that. But it's a very good point.
But we're fighting that good fight with you, right? So I think we're
exactly.
all
I think you all are, which is great. That's what we need. It's definitely a by the industry for the industry community. And we'll jump onto Ray quickly. And I don't want to think Ray's being left out. So Ray, last but not least.
No, I appreciate it, LJ. And in part, and Chris touched on some of the things I think are really relevant in the marketplace. And it was really the reference back to data. And what we try to do here at Sapphire is really look to digitize, the pre-trade experience. We try to be the data reference master for the client, the account, and through that trade life cycle. So as we collaborate, with our partners here, one of the things we need to do is shift that paradigm of, some of the still emails and that manual workload up front to allow for that life cycle, to proceed as we want to. We know through, additional regulation, that the upfront paperwork and requirements that we need to establish being ready to trade are going to continue to increase. So in order to kind of help facilitate the rest of the trade life cycle, we are trying to partner with others, here, as well as make sure that we digitize that upfront experience so that we can get through that trade life cycle, right? We want to stop deferring, kind of our challenges in the marketplace to later in the life cycle and bring it up front and try to solve it up front so we can help be the facilitator to get clean data down through that life cycle. So, it's going to be a collaboration effort. It's one of the things that, we're focusing here at Sapphire of being that data reference master, but then partnering with everybody here to make sure that we can help facilitate, a compressed life cycle as best we can.
Excellent. Great. Thanks, Ray. So everyone here is now giving your kind of view on the industry initiatives, the impact of that. So clearly there's going to be a lot of opportunity. We'd like to think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. I think if you look at some of the words that were said about greater transparency, automation is always going to come up in that, data standards, either following and adhering to the standards or having some type of normalization, obviously probably more on the vendor side. Just kind of looking at some of my notes, but there are definitely some kind of key themes there, which have been key themes in the industry for some time. So I think we're just going to go around again and just kind of touch on what we think some of the key opportunities are. I can think of a few from a Fix perspective, particularly when we look at the payment and settlement piece, and I can touch on that as and when you guys are speaking and jumping in. But how about Lou? Maybe we start with you on this one, from your perspective, some of the kind of key opportunities that are out there and what we can be doing more of within the industry, but also within Fix as well.
Yeah, Lawrence, I want to go back to a couple of things and the use of the word standard. And Fix as a protocol is driving standard ways to communicate information through that life cycle, and very powerful. The history of Fix has gotten great success in terms of digitizing the activity that starts with that client experience, managing risk, creating an investment idea, and then implementing it and trading it, and now moving through the life cycle further through to be able to get more enriched data, better connected data available to everybody. But the reality of it is, I think one of the immediate opportunities in bringing this group together that's actually highlighting this is, like, if we put the T1 lens in this again, there's a lot of information available today, but there's also business practice or things that are preventing the very basic opportunities to advance more real-time data and cleaner data, which are driven from a standard or a business practice, not necessarily the application of a certain format, okay? Trade day processing should be at a higher level today. This group is bringing together optionality to allow for that. Okay, it's available in the marketplace today. Trades, when they're executed, could be processed, confirmed, instructed, settled much sooner. And some of that is bringing up the operating model standard in the industry. Okay, then you apply the technology and the ability to take data and standardize it or make it simpler, flatter for it to move in some interoperable way. Interoperability is a key component of what we're talking about today. We're not forcing a standard. We're creating, we're leveraging where there are data standards today, whether that be FIX or Swift or other formats, to allow the transfer of data to move through our workflows. And where we have a dependency today as an investment manager on a counterparty or on a custodian, the goal is to get that data to move more seamlessly through our proprietary workflows in an interoperable way. And everyone on this panel today is advancing that concept, which is really critical for the ecosystem success to either move from 2 to 1 or at some point in time down the road to T0. Interoperability will be a theme, and that allows the flexibility then for our proprietary processes or systems to communicate more seamlessly. And so, like, when I get back down to what are the opportunities, I think there's great upside to bring everyone's operating model standards up to a higher level. Confirming trades or processing trades in real time, if it's available to you today through your technology or business process, we should be applying that. We should bring the operating model standards up across the industry to just make that a core discipline. Like religion almost, in terms of being able to get information into the market and confirmed and reach finality without friction. And then if we advance this concept of interoperability with the technology available to us today, it is neutral, it's platform neutral, it's agnostic of what system you're on or you choose to use. But the concept of collaborating, I think you mentioned it earlier, and bring that together in a more seamless way is huge benefits to the ecosystem, not just a competitive thing or proprietary thing in terms of the different players individually. So interoperability, I think, will be one of the greatest opportunities to advance this idea, moving through to T1 to support that and beyond at a future date.
Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, the term interoperability, I normally say that wrong, so I pronounced that right the first time. It's a bit of a mouthful, that one. Yeah, that's another key one. We within FIX, just yesterday, we were speaking to the guys at Swift, who have another industry initiative on a UTI to have that down through settlement in the security space and looking to pass that through on a FIX message. So we completely are with you there on the interoperability and the collaboration as well, and working with other industry groups.
Like, at the end of the day, we're all going to have investments in our own technology and business processes, and then to some degree, it's like what we see around the world. We all speak a different language, but how do we get that translation so that the different languages and dialects that we might have come together in some way, in a common way, and then allow us to then communicate and interact, and business processes begin to be more seamless, even though we might speak different languages. Which is, it's probably not going to be cured overnight that we're going to just lean into one standard in one language. And so how do we make those things interoperable and play to each other and get translated? Yeah, agreed. Thanks, Lou. So who shall I shoot to next? How about PAR? I know you've always got very good views on kind of opportunities, and you touched on it in your last piece as well, but maybe kind of what you guys are doing at FinTech, what you see from the industry, and then again, kind of how that plays into the FIX space.
Absolutely. So I would say that element of creating that normalization or that ability to move from kind of one dialect into another is a huge area of focus for us. So we're bringing in so much data, and it's so different, not just across individual organizations, but even their differing internal platforms can have varying kind of naming conventions and stuff like that as well. So our consumption of that data then leads into a significant normalization effort to allow this kind of ease of communication that Lou's talking to. So for those organizations that are adhering to the FIX standards, that's awesome. And obviously we have our own FIX gateway so that we can support that as well. But where organizations maybe aren't adhering to those standards, what can we normalize, what can we cleanse to allow that flow of data, that flow of interaction to be as seamless as possible? So that's something that we're actively working on, that's in place for us at the moment and for our users. So we're enforcing best practice on the one hand as far as we can, and on the other, we're kind of smoothing the way where that's not maybe being adhered to. I think that I'm going to go a little bit further than even saying bring operating standards up, and say I think we need to revolutionize the way that we conduct some of our operational effort. So there's been incremental improvement for years now, 5 years, 10 years. I think the leap to T1 is a massive opportunity for organizations to almost go back to the drawing board and say, if I was redesigning how my operational workflow would look today for the modern world, what would I want and what would that look like? And for me, that's very much an infrastructure that can contain all of the data that I need for a full life cycle of a trade, that allows me to see data that relates to my organization, even if it's been held or published somewhere else, and then actually to be able to collaborate as well. I think that what we tend to find with organizations is that their data in-house is disjointed. You're using one OMS, and then you've got multiple backend infrastructures, middle office platforms, loads of Excel spreadsheets, and then you're dropping into email or whatever else the case may be. So where can we streamline that flow so that the user experience is better, slicker, more efficient? So I think that's a huge opportunity. And that in turn leads into like maximizing of automation, which I think is key. So we know that to achieve the settlement rates that organizations are achieving today, there's a massive amount of manual effort that's done between T0 and T2. If we know that we're losing 80% of that investigation time, you're losing a full day of investigation. What can we do to actually completely reduce that need for manual investigation in the first place? So I think that's another massive thing that we should be aiming for in the months and years to come.
Very good summary, Paul. Very good summary. And how about you, Ray? Obviously, with if we look at, say, T+1, for example, there's probably a whole host of onboarding tasks that if they could be done quicker would be great. Repaperings, documentations. I'm sure there's a huge opportunity there for you guys.
No, that's right. One of the things that my reference point is going to be a few years old here, but if you look at the stat, let's call it 5 years old here, but there was a number out there that 75% of our, at least 75% of your pre-trade data elements were filled in some manual way, shape, or form, whether it's off an email or off of spreadsheets. And we talked about a community here about getting data through the life cycle. Well, one of the biggest voids, or one of the blockers in the industry, is getting that data to make it facilitated through that life cycle. Right, so that's one of the things I see as the biggest opportunity. The way we can, Lou touched on it, and he did a great job with is, and others, about the network effect, right? So there's not going to be a single source here. This is going to be a collaboration effort from this community to make sure that we solve this effort to get from T2 to T1 and then going forward. And when we look at that opportunity, LJ and others, is that we see this void in the industry of we need data. And we're trying to be that data reference master, as I alluded to earlier, to get all that data up front. So we can partner with the other firms here and beyond to make sure that that data is seamless from the beginning, right? We've seen so many times that we've in the industry, that trade life cycle, the problem's always deferred to I think Chris' favorite thing is post-trade, right? And we'll continue to be inefficient as long as we continue to defer. And what we need to do is, as everybody alluded to, is move that data, have it cleaner, have it accurate up front. So when we look to compress that life cycle, the downstream, or the deferring of issues to post-trade is no longer a relevant term for us. It's going to be that network effect. It's going to be cleaner data up front, and it's going to be this community to help, move us to compress that life cycle.
Right, I'm actually really interested to get Chris's views on what he believes opportunities are in the post-trade space. We'll keep calling it post-trade just to really hammer that home to Chris. But yeah, Chris, it'd be great to get your views. Obviously we've been through the buy side now and some of the vendors from a sell side perspective. Probably similar views that everyone else is sharing. It'd be good to get your take on it.
Well, I'll appease you and refer to it as post-trade. And I think, though, it's really the reconciliation space, right? And one of the problems we have, and I know we have this on the sell side, and I know it occurs on the buy side as well, is we reconcile the same trade n number of times throughout that life cycle. We reconcile it at the time of the execution. We reconcile a confirmation. We reconcile a settlement amount. We reconcile the margin. Like, we continuously are reconciling and re-reconciling roughly the same data attributes after the fact. And that's costly, and it's costly to the sell side, it's costly to the buy side. It is a inherent cost in our space. When we're looking at it, and when I'm partnering with the buy side on a solution, right? I like the way Ray's saying that we're deferring, but it's more than just deferring. It's deferring and repeating, and that is a inefficient combination when you're running a business, right? Like you have to look at this from, you start with the way our team works is we start with the client, see where their challenges are, and how do we fix, quote, we use the hashtag fix it for good, right? Not how do we fix it today and then tomorrow we wake up, hey, look, we've got the same misallocation. Why? Because there's some data attribute in the account, or there's a data attribute in how the allocations work. There's just something silly that doesn't get fixed up front, and so we try to solve that. We partner with everyone, with Par, with Ray, with others on these type of calls to find the right solution for that client, right? It's not a one size fits all. I think that's been said multiple times on here. The interoperability, I said that one, Lauren, so that was pretty good for me. That is critical, right? It's not going to be this like homogeneous solution that it creates a nirvana state in the post-trade world. It's just not, right? And so, the fundamental understanding of what you're trying to accomplish in the most efficient way and limiting the touch points on a transaction should be how people are looking to solve the problem. The more times you touch a trade, just think about it, the less P&L you get on that trade. It's a straight line, and it eats directly, and we all, we see, compression and spreads, we see compression and pricing and all that kind of stuff. Taking some of that friction out of the system, I think is the way forward.
Just one thing that I want to add to what Chris said, because it's so critical, back to what he said, a trade's a trade, post-trade kind of is at this stage a little antiquated in terms of how we see things. Like when we create the full lifecycle working group, it was recognition exactly what Chris is talking about. There are all these vertical things that we originally organized around trying to solve problems. We didn't see those things horizontally quickly enough. And so like what we're trying to get back to is what Chris said. I think you just said it, Chris, in the tail end of what you said. It's a transaction. There's information that originates from an investment idea that then transactionally moves through a life cycle. We're agnostic of what their transaction is. It's a trade, it's a collateral movement, it's a periodic payment, it's a corporate action, it's reporting to a regulatory agency of information. Those things are just things that are transactional, live through a life cycle, and then hit statuses along the way. We can flatten it out, like Ray said and Par earlier, and Sean, in your original idea in terms of how this relates to T1, bringing that back together sooner and flatter is what we're talking about. And we're agnostic of what generates the transaction.
So no more post-trade, no more, we'll call it, just call it transaction going forward, which works for me. And actually it's probably testament to this webinar, because we're doing a post-trade webinar, but we have pre-trade on this webinar. So that really just instills your point that it is full life cycle, and it's not, we shouldn't just be focusing on a specific part of the post-trade process, because it effectively is, to your point, a transaction. So Sean,
hey, Lawrence. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to jump onto you. Yeah, well, I wasn't going to do it last but not least on you, Sean, in terms of your views.
Oh, it's good. I prefer going last. I get to play off of everybody else's speaking points, which are totally different than what I planned to talk about. So that's good. Yeah, I think Chris summarized a lot of kind of what I wanted to talk about, which is the multiple touch points, multiple points of reconciliation. Even we at DTC ITP and the legacy Omgeo business, if you look at our legacy suite of products, we were as guilty of that as anyone, right? With clients allocating in Oasis, brokers then confirming in TradeSuite, custodians doing a local match and affirming in TradeSuite. It's all the same data. So I think we had that recognition, several years ago, that the data doesn't need to be touched this many times to get it from that point of allocation where it's coming into us, down to the DTC for settlement. And that's, for those that have heard me talk about our match to instruct initiative, that's the goal. Take out those touch points. We'll also refer to it as the no touch, our no touch workflow. Take out all those touch points, allocate once, confirm on the same platform and have that same data flow all the way down, so it's not doing the multiple hops on both the buy side and through the executing broker to clearing broker to DTC. Capture that data once in what we'll refer to as an authoritative trade record, and then instructed for settlement. So I think very consistent. And in terms of the format or this protocol standard, whatever that we capture that data in, we're open. There's no people will send us as parset data in many different ways, Fix being one of those, and we certainly embrace Fix. It actually makes our life easier to some extent. And then the other theme, just to tie into to some of Ray's points, critical to that no-touch concept and to achieving T1 is the pre-trade data. So that the piece of that that's very relevant to us at ITP is the SSI data. And I hadn't heard that 75% stat before, but it doesn't surprise me, and a lot of that is probably SSI data that was being touched historically. So as many of you know, we've made a huge push into getting the custodians. I don't think we have custodian representation here today, but custodians to support our initiatives around what we refer to as GC Direct, where the custodians who are the owners of that SSI data to be putting that data directly into our platform on behalf of their buy-side clients, so that it's not being touched again, because the historical was that the custodian sent literally a binder to their buy-side clients of SSIs, and sending the same SSIs, right, of their sub-custody network to thousands of IMs for them to then key that in makes no sense. So again, I think that's a huge theme. And then Ray, for you, the other opportunity I think across the industry when we get into these T1 conversations, I think this will resonate with Chris as well. The account opening process overall, I think, scares people, right? Where a buy-side client's allocating to an account that the broker's never seen before, and that now where they may have had half a day to open that account, now that's going to get compressed down into hours or maybe an hour. So we're very focused on looking at that space as well.
Yeah, Sean, just to touch on that last point too, I think was great. I mean, we focused obviously on the data components, and I alluded to that a lot, but having the ability to know that you're ready to trade, and knowing that you're set for, to help eliminate any downstream issues is going to be, critical. We talked about it onboarding, whatever you want to conceptualize that notion to be, but whether you're buy side, sell side, knowing that you're ready to trade, your information set to go is going to be critical for us. So whether you're talking, T2, T1, T0, that component of being ready and making sure that data is up front is key. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Oh, no, thanks guys. So just gonna recap a little bit. So we've gone through the impact of these kind of industry initiatives. You guys have painted a very good picture of some of the opportunities. And now if we do kind of looking ahead, if you look at what we're doing now in the industry, and if you look at, say, like a Nirvana state, and I'm actually going to pick on PAR first, because I like the kind of analogy of if you could whiteboard a process and look at it now versus what they did 20, 30, 50 years ago, how would you do it differently? Because obviously there's a focus, say, on moving to T1 now with accelerated settlement, but T0 is ultimately the kind of long-term goal. You have digital assets playing more of a role in the industry today. So if we just do a quick kind of looking at ahead, what else do you see ahead in terms of once we go to T1, are we future-proofed and well-designed to get to T0? Would that be another 2, 3, 4, 5 year program? Digital assets, when we look at, sorry, Chris, post-trade, and we look at all of these different things you need to do to support asset servicing or the life cycle of a trade, is what we have today suitable for digital assets? So I'll start with you, Park, because I liked the kind of analogy you used of kind of whiteboarding and redesigning it. But yeah, well, what are your views on that?
I meant for everybody else to redesign it, not for me to do it.
Oh, well, I thought you were going back. I thought you were going back to the banks.
Yeah, so like I feel that T1 is a huge leap from T2. I think there's a lot of work that the market needs to do to get to that point, and it feels to me that T0 is another leap again. I've heard stats in other forums where organizations are talking about still receiving funds in through check, where they've got clients instructing over fax. So we're talking today and have spoken so far at like one level, which is assuming automation, assuming that people are at least striving towards adhering to some sort of best practice standard. But there's this whole sector of the market out there that fundamentally isn't really automated at the moment. So if I were to go back and whiteboard it, I would say that the first thing is lowering that barrier of entry for organizations who aren't automated at the moment. What can we do collectively? Obviously, you've got 3 different vendors on the line today, as well as Chris and Lou. So what can we all do to bring these organizations along and help out and bring their processes into the 21st century? And then build out from there using all of the stuff that the guys have put forward today. So ensuring that there's that ability to parse data across different platforms in different languages, but making sure that at some point it is actually smoothed out, normalized, accessible, translated, however you want to describe it, and done in a way that, for me, like when I've talked about this before, and this is a horrible comparison, but I compare it to stuff like Amazon. If I go on Amazon right now, I can order something, pay for something, and have it delivered to my door same day. So to be in a situation where you're moving assets, whether they're digital, whether it's cash amounts, whether it's shares, the fact that it takes us 3 days, 4 days, that 5% of them still fail on average, is something that fundamentally needs to change. So I think T1 is achievable, but it's really going to be a stretch, and organizations should be starting to prepare for it now. I think T0 is a way off given that context. And I'm happy to be shot down by anybody who's on the line just now.
I would agree. And actually, I saw some interesting stats yesterday on a Swift paper they did that actually I think it's closer to 6% now, not that 5%. I think the latest stats from kind of what they see going through their network was, I think 1 month was 6.8% of fails. So obviously it's actually, unfortunately, going the wrong way. So the move to 2+1 is obviously going to hopefully enhance some of that. But you're right, T0 is, I'd call that nirvana state. We are definitely far away from that. I'd like to see it in my career lifetime. Hopefully it will happen. I'm not that old, but hopefully that will happen.
There was one thing. Yeah, Lawrence, I want to tie one really concrete thing. Let's get down to a tangible example. And I think everybody on the panel just talked about it. I go back to Sean's, one, I'll applaud DTC as being a market utility, separate from the applications that they provide into the marketplace as solutions for post-trade things. The idea of creating that interoperability is critical. As a large investment manager and as a technology company, the idea of open APIs and interoperability is critical to us. If you look at the one of the large areas, and Ray pointed this out in terms of why trade failed today, independent of like a market structure or a market short that creates some stress that we'll have to work through, is settlement instructions not being available in real time in ways that are interoperable. So I go back to Sean's comment. Love the effort that DTC put into. And we work very closely with our custodians to make that data more available in real time through a mechanized way through GC Direct. That data, which is ultimately our data in terms of our account instructions held by our custodian, our counterparty who have instructions then today that we're relying on to instruct into the market for settlement, we think there's huge opportunity to make that more available. Through APIs that alert would open up to investment managers that may not choose to use CTM as an example to source that information. So there's a critical area today that creates stress in the market with static data not being updated. Ray's team working on that part. I know you guys are too. But how do we make that more available to everybody in more ways that are more open and integrated to our own proprietary workflows, I think is key. Yep. And I know DTC plays such a critical role in achieving T1 to then get us positioned to go T0 at some point in the future to get that data available to everybody in ways that's more interoperable.
Yep.
Yeah. Because on a T0, you really don't have any time for error. right, it's everything's done on T. It's the allocation.
If I can't source it directly or play it back directly, and how that aligns with Fix, and folks on the call are working on this all today, is that we can put that kind of data, static data is available to go on a Fix tag to move settlement instructions through the marketplace in an interoperable way, to capture it in real time, to bring the quality up at 100%, not to repair it through some pre-matching or confirmation that always shows it as not being up to date or stale, to then ultimately potentially result in a fail.
Yeah, and that also ties very well into the settlement status message that we've been working on, Lou, within Fix, to have that as a real-time status feeding back, which again, Fix is not time-bound. It can be as real-time as you can make it, but with that message, the introduction of that message, then again, that's another area where Fix can offer that optionality, and again, I'll try and say interoperability, got it right that time, right the way through the workflow.
So I hope I'm not skipping my turn, Lawrence, but I mean, that's another huge theme that we touched on in both the previous section, but also I think looking forward, the amount of conversations that we are having with buy-side clients that are suddenly very interested in transparency into the full trade life cycle, and I mean, that's a huge shift, right? If I went back 5 years, the conversation with buy-side clients, particularly hedge funds, was typically, that's my custodian and broker's problem. I trade, they settle. And that attitude has totally, shifted. So clients are now demanding transparency, buy-side clients demanding transparency into that full end-to-end life cycle. And that can't, as we all know, be achieved without, without standardization, right? So you referenced the SWIFT UTI initiative. We're playing a huge role in that. We're generating UTIs today. That's a piece of it, right? How do we tie together the life cycle if we don't have common reference data points? So totally agree.
Great, thanks. No, you weren't jumping your term. I was actually just about to come to you. Anyway, so it's perfect timing. And I think so. We've got about 10 minutes left. So Ray, Chris, really interested just to get your views quickly. We do have a question that's come through, which is either going to go to Lou or Par, because these two words are used very often by yourself, and someone's asking for an explanation of it. So I'll do the question at the end. But yeah, quickly, Ray and Chris, from your perspective, looking ahead to the future, there's been some great stuff come out from these guys. But anything else to add?
Yeah, I think for me, when you're looking at it, there's like the psychological aspect that this group of people can get together and have this conversation, right? And Sean's point of it used to be the client trades and somebody else settles, that concept has gone away broadly, right? The people are understanding the various op risk challenges that get associated with inefficiency. They understand the client service challenges that happen with the inefficiency, and the hygiene problem that comes through with all of this. And so the ecosystem has room, right? And it has room for people to take a look at these challenges. I love the Amazon analogy, and I use it quite frequently myself. It's like, if we can do that, why can't we get a cash settlement to settle on on time? Or how do we not move a security on time? Like, that's all like in computer land. That's not a physical box, which tends to show up at my house multiple times a day, coming through. And so we need to take away the abstract and put it back into reality. And I think that having a group going full front to back, understanding that the interconnectivity, the interrelationship between the data attributes throughout the life cycle will make a huge difference as we move forward, right? We talked about protocols, we talked about standards. Those are key in order to implement a fail-safe future state. If we don't have those, then we'll just continue making the same mistakes of the past and just having a bespoke world of, I've got my way of doing things, Ray's got his, Lou's got his, Sean's got his, Paris got hers, everyone else has their own thing. We're all going to run in opposite directions. We're going to confuse everyone. We'll confuse the client. We'll confuse and just have a bigger mess. Interoperability allows us all to partner together, speak our own language, be native to our own internal firms, yet be open up to everyone else and partner.
And just for me, just to piggyback off of what Chris alluded to, the scope of our problem here is the trade life cycle, and how do we continue to compress it over time. And to me, it's always going to come down to three things, and we all talked about it in different forms. Number one is data, whether it's clean data, whether it's having trust in our data, not to reconcile, as Chris alluded to it 10 or more times. So that's number one, is going to be data. Number two is going to be the collaboration, right? This group together is going to continue to work together to figure out how to solve and come up with creative solutions to continue to compress this life cycle. We know about the benefits. It's going to provide a liquidity. It's going to make us less efficient. It's going to reduce margin requirements. So all those things that are going to help us with this, it's going to take a collaborative effort to get there. And then finally, I think it's going to come down to the network. So not only building solutions together to make sure we solve this, for our clients, but the network effect of doing this together, right? I think those are going to be the three things that allow us to continue to move forward to make sure this life cycle continues to compress.
Sorry, I was on mute. So I couldn't agree more. Okay, great. So we've got 4 or 5 minutes left. I do need to do a little bit of tidy up at the end, but we've got this one question come through. I'll aim it at you first, Pa. So the question is, I'm hearing normalize and flatten. Could we clarify what is meant by normalize?
Sure thing. So when I'm talking about normalizing data, what I mean is that ability to translate all of our different dialects into a single naming convention. So when, if I break it down into a real life example for you, when we look across our data universe here at Access FinTech, we see something like 260 to 280 different fail reason codes that are used, and we've been able to collapse those down to 7. We took 1,200 different kind of instruction status, trade status descriptions, and collapsed that down into 140. So that's one part of it. It's taking all of these slight variations or flavors of a language and normalizing them down into a shorter list so that that data is more usable and more meaningful. A second kind of strand of this is when we look across the data that we consume, and to a point I made earlier, this can vary from organization to organization or even different platforms within the same organization. You often see data annotated differently. So trade date might appear as trade date, might appear as TD, might be TRD, might be execution date, on and on and on. And you think, hey, that's not a big deal because I can look at all of these different variations and I know exactly what they mean. But when it comes to using the data, navigating the data and sharing it, the way that you're calling it out across all of your different platforms makes it more complicated than it needs to be to navigate and use that data. So again, it's taking all of these little variations and actually saying on our platform, it's always going to say trade date for everybody. So it's nice and clear and easy to use. So when I'm talking about normalizing data, that's what I mean. Lou, I hope that we're aligned.
Yeah, 100%, because you get to really that translation again. I call it ticker. Sometimes that's a security ticker. It could be an account ticker. It could be one tag in Swift or a different tag in Fix or FPML. It's the data attributes are all the same, but we're using that dialect to kind of make them more disparate when they could flatten or get cleaner or harmonized. The flattening also goes back to, I think, what Ray said. We want to get data from the source and we want to get it sooner. We have a concept at BlackRock we call gold copy. We don't look at gold copy as all of BlackRock's data is the gold copy. We might have the data at the earliest point that somebody's then relying on further into the workflow. And so everybody has at some point some data that is at that higher quality. But then we see the drop off in the way it's either translated or carried and linked through the full life cycle. And so for us, it's really how do we get more of that captured up front from the source and then maintain it all the way down so we don't have the continuous reconciliation or cleanup to some of that today. When Sean mentions UTI example, is it an order ID and a repeating tag that then becomes a trade ID that then links to the allocation or the confirmation or the corporate action that comes off the asset sourcing activity for that position? Like there's these common threads that are there today, but we're applying them all differently. And if we get that right, like Bart talked about, I think that cleans up. And then it allows for what Ray's saying. It's actually then going to speed the movement of data and the quality of it maintained all the way through the life cycle.
Could not have said it better myself. No, thank you, both of you. It was a very, very good example. So we've got a couple of minutes left. First, I just want to thank the speakers again. Thank you so much. I think that was a great discussion, and we really did cover a good spectrum. Just some kind of final comments. I think there was a lot of themes, you know, interoperability being one of the main ones, maybe renaming post-trade, but we'll leave that to Chris. We've got ready to trade, we got fail-safe, future state, you know, all of these kind of buzzwords, data sharing, transparency, but a lot of it really is around collaboration. It's around that interoperability, and it's about making use of the standards that we have there today. I'm going to write a summary off the back of this session, which we will be pushing out there. But again, thank you to the speakers. Thank you to all the guests. Amy, I believe there was another couple of slides, just some closing slides on some upcoming events. So we have some more events coming up mid-July. We're going to be having another one of these webinars. It's going to be a little bit more about technology and the evolution of that. We are still planning to have an in-person event in November. So we used to have these, you know, kind of pre-pandemic. We'd have one in April and we'd have one in November, both on the East Coast. We are trying to get that locked in either in New York or Boston around early November, and we want to have that either a half day or full day event. So a very big event, a lot of content, so we'll keep everyone posted on that. And then there's some other global events coming up as well. The other slide, Amy, I think is more around some of the other initiatives that we have. So we've spoken about accelerated settlement, payment and settlement messaging. They all come into the Global Post-Trade Working Group. Then we have the Digital Assets Group, which just published its gap analysis about 3-4 weeks ago. And then some other groups we have looking at some regulatory reporting and NDF fixings, ETF standards. So a huge amount going on in FIX right now. If you want to get involved, please do get in touch. And thank you again to the speakers, and thank you for everyone who joined. Have a good day.
Thanks, Lawrence. Take care, everyone.
Lawrence, thank you, everyone.